section on oceanography. Today we will be talking about the concept of coral reefs. Corals are the structures that are found in the ocean bottom. So when we talk about corals, we'll first understand how the corals are formed. So we'll first talk about the formation of corals. We'll talk about the important characteristics of corals. Then we'll talk about the various theories that govern the coral reef development. So when we talk about the formation, the previous picture shows you a view of the ocean bottom with corals. So corals are basically colorful creatures that are found in the ocean. And how does this color come from? So corals are basically polyps that are found in the ocean bottom. And the top of the coral attracts animals, or it's the main source from where the animals can get captured or small insects can get captured. The exoskeleton or the outer body of the coral is made of calcium carbonate, and that calcium carbonate forms the basis for the corals, and that slowly and gradually deposits to form the reef-shaped structure. Now, the top of the corals have structure which is known as zooxanthella. And this zooxanthella is the main structure of the coral that gives the color. So we find the corals in various colors as we have seen in the previous slide. So these colors come from the zooxanthella. Now when we classify corals, we basically classify them into two types. We call them hermatypic and ahermatypic. So hermatypic are the corals that have zooxanthella, and ahermatypic are the corals that have no zooxanthella. Since they have the zooxanthella, they give colors. They are usually found in warm and shallow waters, and they are mainly responsible for the beautiful coral reefs that we can see. On the other hand, ahermatypic, which do not have zooxanthella, are responsible for formation of small reefs in the ocean bottom. So these hermatypic are not that deep, but ahermatypic are definitely found in the ocean bottom and are deep structures which have small reefs, and since they do not have zooxanthella, they do not kind of give plenty of colors as compared to hermatypic. So our main focus today would be about the hermatypic coral reefs. Now we classify coral reefs based on how they are formed. Before we understand that, let's talk about some of the basic characteristics of corals. Now corals are formed in very specific type of climate as we previously mentioned. So there is a specific range of temperature and salinity that is maintained. So it's usually 20 to 21 degrees of temperature. Then you have around 60 to 70 meters of depth. You have salinity ranging from 27 to 40 parts per thousand. Usually found in shallow waters. The range across the world is 25 degrees north to 25 degrees south. It's mainly found in sediment-free water where there is no sediment deposit. So sediment-free water is another important characteristic. So the water should be clean, and there should be optimum level of sunlight that can reach up to the photic zone. The zones we have talked about in the initial class in oceanography. So these are some of the basic characteristics that are required for the formation of coral reefs. Since there is a very narrow range of temperature salinity, in which the corals can be formed, it's less than 1/10 of the region of the ocean surface that have coral deposits. We'll be working out a world map where we'll see the coral deposition regions of the world. Now, it's important to understand, since corals are found in warm shallow waters, what would happen where the cold current is touching the coast. Usually on the west side or the western part of the continental margins. So these are the western continental margins. What happens is, due to cold current, what would happen is there would be upwelling, and this upwelling will be from a depth, and this will move off the warm surface. As a result, the temperature would decrease, and therefore the western coastal margins are the regions where there are no corals or no coral reefs. So that's important to understand, that how coral reefs are formed and which are the main centers for formation of the coral reefs. Now we'll understand the classification of the coral reefs. We classify coral reefs mainly into 3 types. We call it fringing reefs, barrier reefs, and atolls. Before that, we'll understand the world pattern, as I said. So it's less than 1/10 of the region of ocean surface which is covered by coral. So less than 1/10 of 1% of the ocean surface. So as you can see, most of the corals are confined to this region, the Australia and the Melanesian Polynesian islands. You have some coral deposits found on the coast of Yemen, and then you have coral reefs found in Indian Ocean. A lot of coral reefs have been found in the Caribbean seas and few near the Hawaiian Islands. So now, as we talked about the 3 major classifications of coral reef, the first is the fringing reef. So this is what is fringing reefs. Now, fringing reefs are formed adjacent to the island, okay? And since they are formed adjacent to the island, they kind of touch the continental margins, and where the continental margins are less steep, there are more fringing reefs that are found on those margins. Slowly and gradually, there is subsidence of the volcano that is happening, and that subsidence leads to kind of reduction in the height of the existing island, and you can see a kind of barrier reef which is formed around the main volcano or the main island, and you have water that lies in between, and this phenomena is known as barrier reef. And finally, under the process of subsidence, what happens is this volcano subsides beneath the water, and there is only the reef that you can find, and this reef is known as atoll. So you have the reef which is formed, and within the reef you have water. So this is how the development of the coral reefs takes place. Now, to understand this development, there have been various theories that are being propounded. So we would be talking about various theories and how the process of deposition of coral or development of coral takes place, and we can see how fringing reef develops into barrier reef and finally into an atoll around any active volcano, which the waters around which are usually warm and shallow. So here we have an animation that will help you understand how coral reefs are formed. So as you can see in this animation, let me start from the very beginning of the animation. So you have an island, you have small depositions that are coming here, which is fringing reef. Now slowly this is subsiding, so this becomes barrier reef, and finally this goes down, and the remaining water body which is left behind is known as the atoll. So as you can see here, this water body surrounded by the reef is the atoll, and this is the fringing reef which is formed on the boundaries, and finally you have the barrier reef in between. So as we can see, when it is going down. At this point I can say there is a gap and there is water in between, and this region is under this process of development we say this region becomes the barrier reef. Now, when we talk about corals, there is an important concern that is getting more and more weightage these days, that is the concept of coral bleaching. So what is happening with developments? You have a lot of industrial waste coming into the waters, lot of sewage and discharge that is going into the water, that is leading to decoloration of the zooxanthellae. We have already talked about zooxanthella, which is the main structure of the corals, and the decoloration, or I could say the discoloration of these zooxanthella would lead to coral bleaching. That means the corals would be there would be hard depositions of calcium carbonate, but they would lose their color. So loss of color happens, and there are various factors that lead to coral bleaching. The first is the impact of global warming. So we can say due to global warming the temperature is rising, and that leads to the phenomena of coral bleaching. Sudden changes in salinity pattern. For example, if a river is draining into the ocean body and due to low rainfall that river goes dry, so what would happen in that region particularly, the salinity would increase, and that could also affect the coral bleaching. Then you have sedimentation. If there are a lot of sediments that are flowing into the ocean, that would lead to demolition of the coral reefs. If there is a lot of fresh water, what happens is the erosion increases, and that leads to again decrease in salinity. As we previously mentioned, corals can survive only in a specific temperature and salinity zones. Then there are xenobiotics, that are chemicals that affect the development of the corals. Epizootics, those are pathogens that damage the coral reefs. And finally you have cyanides. So you have cyanide fishing, that is an important cause for the coral bleaching. Now, we have talked about how coral reefs are formed, what are the main characteristics, how the decoloration takes place, and what is coral bleaching. But the important thing still remains is how these corals are formed. So under this, there are four major concepts that have been propounded, or four major theories that have been given. The first theory that we will be discussing today is the Subsidence Theory, given by Darwin and later propounded by Davis. This is also known as Dana-Davis theory. To understand this theory, I'll just move back to that animation. So this is how we understand the subsidence theory. So subsidence theory basically says there was an active volcano around which the reefs started to develop. Slowly there was subsidence of the landmass. That subsidence is not in a day or two, it's over thousands and thousands of years that occur. And slowly there were barrier reefs that were found. And finally, when whole of the island subsided, there were atolls that were formed. The common example of atoll is the Confab atolls in the Ellis Islands. An example of barrier reef is the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. An example of Fringing Reef is the Bora Bora Islands and the nearby areas. So this concept was first propounded by Darwin in 1842. This was later on propagated and further given by Dana and Davis, and therefore it's also known as Dana-Davis theory. Most of the reefs that meet this theory are found in the Pacific region, and this holds true for most of the coral reef formations in India. The next theory that we would be talking about is the Glacial Control Theory. The Glacial Control Theory, or the second theory that we would be talking about, talks about the Ice Age or the Pleistocene Ice Age. During this period, there was a sudden drop in temperature and sea level that led to a drop in sea level by around 198 to 228 feet. Due to sudden decrease in the sea level, what happened was there were small islands that were found on the ocean surface, and there was development and colonization that started around these small islands. Over the period of time when the ice age got diminished, the sea level again started to rise. This rise in the sea level led to recolonization of the existing reefs. So as the sea level rose, you had colonies that the reef development that started going around that started developing around those island bodies. And this was the basic concept that lied behind the glacial control theory. Now, over the time, there was rise in the sea level and the temperature kind of left within the tolerance level, and when the temperature got struck between the tolerance level, at that time there was the maximum formation of reef that took place. Now there was an important critique of this theory, and that critique was basically, what is the reason for the development of corals in the equatorial region? Because since this theory says during ice age there was a sudden drop in the temperature in the sea level, but that never happened in the equatorial region. So the equatorial region temperature was always high, it never dropped to that level, and that is one of the main criticism of this theory. The importance of this theory was mainly in the process of subaerial formation or subaerial exposure, I should say, because there was changes in the exposure of the land that was taking place. The next theory is the standstill theory that was propounded by Murray. Murray fundamentally believed that there lies a stable platform. So what is happening is, the land platform which is there, it's always stable. Okay? So the land that is there is always stable and all developments are taking place around it. So what is happening is, there is a kind of unchanging sea levels, and decrease in the ocean sea level would lead to deposition of reefs alongside the stable platforms. The basic concept that this theory propounded was, since it's the name is standstill, we say there is a kind of stable platform around which the reef development took place. But an important consideration here was, they considered it at a depth of 180 feet. So what would happen? That is the minimum required depth that they talked about. So the major criticism lies here. What would happen if the depth is less than 180 feet? So according to this theory, if the depth is less than 180 feet, there should not be any coral reefs which should be seen. But in reality, that is not the case. So that is one of the criticisms of this theory. Now, the next theory that we talk about today is the Karstic saucer type theory, which was given by Purdy and Guilcher. This theory basically believed that the formation of coralline platforms takes place due to the deposition, and that deposition, since it's made of calcium carbonate that is karstic in nature, and the percolation of rainwater is much deeper towards the center as compared to the sides. As a result, there is a shape of saucer that is formed, and therefore this theory is known as the Karstic saucer theory. This theory is one of the least common theories in the process of coral reef developments that we have ever talked about. There is an important limitation for this theory, because according to this theory, there would be a kind of depression here, and there should be corals which are able to live above the sea level, which is never the case. So the major criticism here is the coral should be able to live above sea level, which can never be the case because above the sea level you have waves and wind erosion that affects the coral. So that can never be possible. That is never possible, and this is the major criticism of this theory. So as we see, among the four theories, the most popular theory is the subsidence theory that was given by Darwin and later on propounded by Dennis and Darwin, Dana and Daly, sorry. And we have already talked about how this theory originated. And most of the Pacific reefs or the Pacific corals that we can see are based on the subsidence theory. So this was all about the coral reef formation. We will be talking about the laws of the sea in the next class. Till then, have a good day.